Let's take a look at the progress review module on Onefile. So as we know, progress reviews are a requirement of apprenticeships. They must take place every 12 weeks, so that's every 3 months. And this is essentially a meeting between yourself as the learner, your mentor or your line manager as a representative from your employer, and there'll be your skills coach or assessor, in other words, a representative from your training provider. So the three of you will get together every 12 weeks, that's every 3 months, to discuss the progress that you've made on your apprenticeship. And generally speaking, this is quite a positive opportunity. It's great to get your mentor in that call and run through all of the great things that you've managed to do over that 3 months. And you can also set longer term goals as part of this discussion that you can complete over the next 3 months. And so the Onefile system would capture this information in that progress review module. To access this, you can either select Progress Review from the main navigation bar on the left-hand side of the screen. Alternatively, if you go to your home page, you'll be able to find the Progress Review button on your home page as well, and it will take you through here. Before it gets to this screen, there will be a list of previous progress reviews that may have taken place, and you can actually go back and look at what was recorded on those dates, and then you'll have the current one as well there. And so with this, a lot of it is driven by the data on Onefile. So part of this discussion will be looking at the amount of off the job that's been logged. It'll be looking at the unit progression between the reviews, but there'll also be a discussion for wider aspects of the apprenticeship as well. So in terms of general structure, focuses on the data, looks at all the different requirements of the apprenticeship to see how you're getting on with it. Stuff like your functional skills, your off the job, keeping up to date with your journal, keeping up to date with your assessments. It also looks at some of the pastoral care elements such as safeguard and prevent, British values, and so on. So it looks at sort of everything, and it's a sort of structured discussion through this. Now, all training providers will complete this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to show you a progress review form here, but the review form that you'll actually use on Onefile may look quite different to this. That being said, you will be talking through similar topics, but it's for the most part, it's up to training providers to design this form in Onefile. It's not like a standard form that Onefile provides. Each training provider can design their own progress review form, and they'll design it the way that works for them and their particular centre, so it might look a little bit different. And so the first box we can see here is standardised. In fact, the first two boxes here are standardised. It's part of the Onefile system. And the first box is off the job progression between reviews. And so this shows, again here, the target hours that you've got, the actual hours that you've logged, the percentage that you've logged, and the last time you put in some off the job entries in there as well. And it also shows you the change since the last review. If this is the first progress review that you're completing, then you'll just have these two little dashes here for all of them. But if it's your second or subsequent progress review, you will see some data feed through here. So you can see this learner has logged an additional 21 hours since the last review. It doesn't seem like a lot, but this learner's right at the end of their apprenticeship, and they've already logged, they've already passed, as you can see here, the minimum number of hours that they have to log to get through Gateway anyway, so that's good. If we move on further down the form, this box here is also part of the Onefile system, so you'll probably see this in your progress review, and this is looking at unit progression between the progress reviews. And so what it shows you here is each of the different units. Now this learner's doing a procurement apprenticeship. So you can see that they do have their 3 units. They do have their knowledge unit, skills unit, and behaviours unit that makes up their apprenticeship standard, which is here. They've also got their gateway unit, so they can track progress towards gateway, and their endpoint assessment unit, so they can track progress towards the endpoint assessment. So that's all pretty standard. They have their functional skills in maths and English here. That's also standard with all apprenticeships. These units here to do with a professional qualification that's part of the procurement apprenticeship. This is professional qualification. The learners must pass an exam to close these units off, and there's 5 exams for this particular qualification. So that's what they are. But you can see here that most of this is already at 100%. And there's some slight progress towards Gateway. The learners at the Gateway stage, and you can see they've added on 14% to their Gateway, and they've also logged some progress towards their functional skills as part of that. So there has been progress there. And this is the sort of discussion that your assessor, your skills coach, will be having with you as they run through the review. So they'll talk about the change that's taken place. We scroll down further, this third box, again, this one's also standard in the Onefile system. And what this will show is this will show all of the assessments which you have completed since the last review. And it gives the training provider, it gives the skills coach an opportunity to sort of talk through these, comment on the number of assessments you completed, the standard that they've been completed to, and you could always ask the trainer to take a look at any particular assessments that you might want to talk about during that review. You obviously already would have had feedback on those assessments before coming into the review, but while your employer's there as well, you might want to sort of discuss any of those, and you can comment on them in the review. Scroll down further. This is where it gets where it changes between different providers, so they can design their own form. But generally speaking, I'll run through this one and show you this sort of roughly what we'll find here. So it says there the apprenticeship. That's the course that you're on. Shows the employer name and your skills coach or your tutor's name. Down here it's got options to put in how you've been getting on since the last review, so what knowledge, skills and behaviours have been covered on the apprenticeship. How have you got on with that apprenticeship programme so far? What's the positives been of that apprenticeship so far? Have there been any barriers to learning? For example, you're unsure how to spend your off-the-job time, how to approach resources, problems with Onefile, organisation, etc. So it's an option just to show, because the skills coach, the tutor, they'll talk through this, they'll ask you the questions and they'll type up as they go along, and so that there's an opportunity to raise any concerns that you've got. There's an option, there's a box there for have you been able to complete your off-the-job hours? When do you tend to complete them? How do you plan that out? You can have a discussion around this. We've also got, does the apprentice have any questions about the general apprenticeship or areas of the review that they would like to focus on? And again, that would be followed by a discussion led by the learner on how they're getting on with apprenticeship and anything they want to talk about. Also, it captures data in terms of attendance at workshop sessions. Attempted contacts means calls that learners not arranged but not joined or cancelled prior to joining, so it can track this. Moving on, we're then looking at functional skills, and so there's data in terms of the initial assessment results for maths and English there, and there's also a box to capture data on progress towards each of those functional skills units. Further down, we've got scorecard. So in here, the skills coach would document when the scorecard was last updated, checking that it's within the last 8 weeks, because you want to do this regularly. And if there's been any issues affecting plan progress, that information can also be captured as part of the review. Moving further on, we'll then take a look at the learning journal. If I was doing this particular review form, I'd load up the learning journal in a separate tab, have a quick run through it, and comment on how well the entries have been put in there. And so this form's capturing, first of all, to check that the learner is using their journal to show their learning and development. That is part of those journal entries. They are critically analysing what they have learned and they've been able to show that they're applying that in the workplace. There's also a box to capture that the learning journal includes a reflection of the learner's strengths, areas of development, and what they may need to work on over the next few weeks. So it's not enough just to say I did this thing, but there's got to be a reflection, a bit of detail on what you have actually learned, how you've learned it. There's also a box to capture, is there anything that the apprentice has not logged? So if there is gaps, it can be logged here. There's a check to make sure that the learner is linking their journal entries to the knowledge, skills and behaviours. So that's when you're in the journal, you're creating your entry, click that criteria button, and then click the KSBs which your learning links to. And that really is just to show that the learning that you're doing is relevant to your apprenticeship standard. And the last box in this learning journal area is the apprentice using the exemplar learning journal entries as a template for their learning journal records. In other words, it's just a check that the learner is using the right structure for their journal entries. It's not too complicated, but basically it's just to say the learner is documenting what they've learned, how they've learned it, and how they would use that information in the future. So the next section of this particular progress review form is looking at the work-based learning and evidence. And it's also looking at mentor meetings. So that's your mentor in the workplace. So the first question is, does the apprentice understand the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the apprenticeship standard? There's then an option to check that you're using the gap analysis and just to confirm you're familiar with how this works. And there's also a box there to capture if the learner's using the apprenticeship standard to record and reference their knowledge, skills and behaviours. In other words, you're mapping your assessments into your knowledge, skills and behaviours. That's really just to say that you're familiar with them and that you know that when you complete an assessment, what you're saying is that assessment demonstrates that I am competent at the competencies that you've mapped it against. Next question, is the apprentice able to track their work-based learning and evidence opportunities throughout the month? The way that you would do this varies, depends on individual preference and the training provider, but basically you might have a spreadsheet that tracks assessments you're going to do in the future, or you might plan it into Onefile using um, create your own assessments or the teaching learn assessment plan function, but some way you're tracking future planned assessments. And then the next question here, are the apprentice and the mentor meeting regularly to discuss the apprenticeship? So it's best practice for learners to have a regular monthly one-to-one meeting with their mentor. That meeting really is to discuss information relevant to your role in the workplace, but as part of that conversation, you can discuss your apprenticeship. So you can let your mentor know what assessments you're completing, what training's coming up, and how you're getting on with your qualification. And if there's anything that they can do to help, you can also raise this during those meetings. And then there's other options here if any action plans or targets need to be agreed as part of this discussion. Moving on, we have then got a section on off-the-job planning and milestones. So this is outlining, this is just to check that the learner has completed the required number of off-the-job hours. Again, if we go back to the top of this form, it does show what those off-the-job hours are. So it just involves capturing that data to show, okay, how many hours should the learner have completed, how many have they completed, and to do a printout of that timesheet. So that's the categories that were at the top of the page. Sorry, if you go to your timesheet, it's there also. If you go into your timesheet, it shows you the different categories of the job training, and it shows you how many hours you've logged against that. So it's an opportunity to print that there, so it's captured every 3 months. And if any action needs taken here, there's a box to capture any smart targets around that. The next section is just to check that the learner's Onefile is up to date, and if not, what needs to be updated. And then we've got our pastoral care fields, essentially looking at welfare information, advice and guidance. So during this review, we would discuss safeguarding and its importance. We'd discuss equality and diversity and its importance. We'd also discuss the prevent anti-radicalisation strategy. We'd also discuss health and safety and its importance. And there's a box here for anything else that might come up as part of those discussions. Again, this is it's a requirement of the apprenticeship that these things are mentioned and discussed and the learners are familiar with it. So it's a way of capturing that this is happening regularly with the apprentice every 3 months. This section here is looking at gateway and endpoint assessment. So it's always important to have a think about where you will end up with this apprenticeship. When are you going to complete it? It shouldn't be something that's a mystery. It should be something that's discussed regularly and planned for. And so when completing the progress review, typically there is a discussion around, first of all, when are you scheduled to go through Gateway? When are you scheduled to go through endpoint assessment? How far through the apprenticeship are you? And are you likely to meet those dates, those in terms of your expected end date on the program? And if you are brilliant, there's some um, goals, some targets for you to hit to try and get you there. If not, there'll be some goals or targets to try and basically catch you up. Take a bit of corrective action to support you so that you can try and meet that planned end date or at least get as close to it as possible. There's a RAG status and there's some comments on that RAG status as well. Next section is on progression. So the question here is, has the learner experienced any progression since they've started their apprenticeship or since the last review? So that's about work-based progression. Are you getting more advanced tasks, more responsibility in the workplace, that sort of thing? And the second box that's part of this section is looking at, well, once you have completed this qualification, would you be interested in completing a higher level qualification if one exists? The next section of the progress review is the learner voice. Essentially, it's a satisfaction survey, and that will vary from training provider to training provider. The section after this is looking to capture any changes to contact details, so it's best practice to ask this question during the progress reviews just to make sure that the Onefile systems are all up to date in terms of your mentor's details and your work email address and the best number to contact you on and so forth. We've also got comments. So to finish off the progress review, there is a box for the learner to provide their comments on the review. There's a box for the training provider, so the skills coach or assessor, to provide their comments, and the employer also has a comment box that they can fill out as well. So during the review, typically the trainer would share their screen, run through this form, have discussions, type it up as they go along. Once they've completed it, they'll go to the bottom and they will sign it. It'll then come to the learner. You'll find it in your task list. So you should go to your task list. It'll say, please sign the progress review dated. I'll have the date of the progress review. Click on that. Takes you to this form. You'll want to scroll through it, check you're happy with it. If there is a box for you to add comments, you can provide your comments there. And then right at the bottom, you have got the signature block. And to sign the progress review, you would tick the box that's after your name, and then you'd select on the green button to sign the progress review. If the training provider has set up employer accounts, so your employer can access your portfolio, it will also go to your line manager mentor for them to sign to. So they can sign into their Onefile account, they can select on their task list, they'll select on the task which is please sign the progress review, scroll down to the bottom, add their comments, employer comments, tick the box after their name, click the green button. Once all three parties have signed this document, it's then marked as being completed and that the progress review has taken place. The good thing about Onefile is it captures all this in the one system and it's fully reportable and you can go back and check on it. So it does make life a lot easier than perhaps using things like electronic signatures on Word documents or paper forms as well. So it's good that this is all captured in the system.